All right, let's start with the rapid fire round just to break the ice. The first question is, at what age do you want to retire?
Never.
How long does it take you to get ready in the mornings?
20 minutes.
Favorite color?
Blue.
What time of day are you most inspired?
6 a.m.
How many hours of sleep can you survive on?
5.
Fill in the blank. An upcoming technology trend is blank.
The AI trend is very real.
The city in which the best kiss of your life happened.
Ooh. San Francisco.
Pick one, Mark Zuckerberg or Jack Dorsey.
Neither.
Biggest mistake of your career.
Too early on streaming TV.
How do you relax?
Play music.
How many cups of coffee do you drink per day?
Way too many.
A habit of yours that you hate.
Fidgeting.
The most valuable skill you've learned in life.
Patience.
Your favorite OTT show.
Ooh. Star Trek: Strange New Worlds.
One word description of your leadership style.
Inclusive.
Top priority in your daily schedule.
Thinking.
Ideal vacation spot for relaxation.
I would say just the beach in general.
All right, well, that's the end of the rapid fire round. Let's go on to the longer questions, which you can answer with as much ease or time as you like. The first one is, how has Paramount Global's AI-first approach shaped the company's overall technology strategy?
Well, I think we've been very pragmatic with our approach to AI. We recognized, very early on, and we've been doing this, for, well over 7 years, that, AI had great application to things that are obvious, like content recommendations, content processing. But really, from 2022 onward, we saw this great next phase of AI. And our approach there was to, partner with the leading technology companies that are either building the top foundation models or exposing those capabilities to products and tools that we already use. So we did a partnership with Adobe to make sure that we could empower our many thousands of editorial creatives to use AI in their day. And that idea of educating our teams, giving them tools today that enabled them to use the technology, and then seeing what comes out of it, that running of that experiment we found to be very successful and also cost effective. And it gives us the ability to adapt as this AI wave continues to take different shapes.
And are there any challenges that you've faced in fostering this AI-centric culture at such a large-scale company?
The biggest challenge with AI has been the fear. And that fear, in some cases, is valid. In most cases, it's not valid. So we've had to do a lot of education, awareness. And in many cases, it was simply getting those that had concerns, getting them to use the technology and learning very quickly where it could help them. And also, I think mostly learning its limitations, because there's been, a false narrative that somehow AI is going to create a TV show or it's going to create a movie. You just need to use it in a practical way to learn very quickly. That is not the case. And it can do some very, relatively small things to help you in that process. So to me, the fear and overcoming that through education has been, the biggest challenge.
So speaking of this cycle of AI innovation, if one was to look back at your time as founder of Liquid Audio and Sezmi, how did those pioneering efforts shape your perspective on media innovation today?
Well, both of those really recognized, what was about to come, and primarily in terms of internet distribution of media. With Liquid Audio, we saw the convergence of trends in technology between the compression of audio using things like MP3 and then the scale of the internet. We saw that technology convergence would enable a new consumer experience, and we were right. But both with Liquid Audio and even more so with Sezmi, the thing that's we got wrong, I think, in Sezmi was just timing. We did everything else right. We built the first recommendation system built into a TV system, many other things that could go on that we did right. But we had expected the market to shift dramatically in pay TV in the period of around 2010. And it didn't really even start to move significantly until 5 or more years later. So I think the thing I learned in all of that is to be a bit patient, even when you see an obvious trajectory for the industry. Be realistic about timing, and because there are many factors, primarily economic factors, that you have to take into account before we get to the ultimate market, and that's now playing out in the TV space with quickly approaching a point where the majority of all viewing is going to be coming over an internet distributed product.
So if you were to start a media tech company today, what areas of innovation would you focus on?
Well, obviously, I would try to identify a market opportunity that can be disrupted through AI. And I don't say that, like many of the startups that are just saying they're an AI company, you have to really find an area that can meaningfully be disrupted in a positive way with the application of AI. And there are many of those. And obviously, the funding level for new innovative startups is pretty dramatic. But similar to the internet bubble, we are going to go through the AI bubble, where many of these companies are very shallow in their thinking about the application of AI, and maybe have a feature versus a full company. But I've got several ideas, I always do, about areas where I think there's some big opportunities, applying AI to really build a new, better business around media.
And so coming back to Paramount, then how do you see AI transforming marketing strategies at Paramount, particularly in terms of targeting and personalizing content for global audiences?
I actually think that marketing is one of the areas that will have the most benefit from AI now. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One is that most of the content that's produced for marketing purposes is derivative from existing content. AI is really good at taking existing content, transforming it, modifying it. So our marketing teams have really embraced that as they try to create targeted content to hit different channels or different demographics, and produce more content to feed into the multitude of channels they have to reach consumers now. So I feel like marketing is already the area where we're making the most progress in terms of use of AI, and I think that will continue. The big question for the industry is whether that means we're more effective with our marketing or even more efficient. I think we'll have to wait and see whether that plays out. But I do think we're going to have better, more targeted, and certainly get some more interesting campaigns coming out of widespread use of AI.
And how do you ensure that AI-driven marketing remains authentic and avoids oversaturation of personalized content?
Well, that's why you have people doing it. So really, it's a key element of this discussion around AI is that there always has to be a human in the loop. There is a judgment, there is an awareness of the world and context that we really need humans to be in there, using this, as it is. It's a tool. And the judgment that comes in the content that's being created and what's going out into the world still very much sits in the hands of the creatives. So I think as long as we've got the right creatives in the room, we won't run into that problem.
So as a pioneer of digital music and OTT TV, how do you see the future of IP-based content delivery evolving?
Can I just ask you to clarify that? So when you say IP-based content delivery, you mean like the technical distribution of it or just internet distribution generally?
The technical.
Well, I think the current model that's been built up around content delivery networks, sitting on the edge and, us working across multiple content delivery networks, that will continue. But I think the scale of the cloud fabric that's, covering the globe with the hyperscalers now, that's going to become more and more capable of really doing, all of the delivery that we need. So I do expect that just the architecture, the network architecture in particular, is going to change to be actually much simpler as more and more of kind of global compute moves into these public cloud models.
So your background spans both digital music and media at Sony and Hearst. How have those experiences influenced your approach to all this at Paramount?
Well, I think the experience with music, seeing that industry go from one that was very stable on a single media model, namely compact discs at the time I entered it with technology, seeing it move from that stable model, go through the disruption and kind of destruction of the business and come out the other side, with a new model built around, wide scale streaming. That gave me kind of the longer view in terms of other media markets and how those would evolve. And I dealt with that on the print side of the business when I was at Hearst. Obviously dealing with that now in the context of television at CBS and the broader Paramount. So just give me that longer term view to look at the arc of this transition of the industry and make sure we're well positioned, but we don't panic, and have a bit of pragmatism about how quickly things will move.
So who do you think are the biggest winners and losers from the music transition, and who will be the biggest winners and losers from the upcoming media transition?
Well, look, I think in the music transition, consumers are huge winners. The amount of content you have access to now is something you could not imagine in the mid 90s before all of this happened. And at that point, you still had to spend, $10 to $20 to buy, 10 to 20 songs. And that was it. You played those over and over again. And it was very limited, outside of radio in terms of your access to music. And now it's unlimited. So I think from a consumer perspective, that's all positive. And I think it's great for artists as well. When I started Liquid Audio, a driver for that company was as much, helping the artists as the consumer, because in that moment, it was very hard for anyone other than large stars to break through, because you had all this friction with producing bits of plastic and how you sent that out into the world. So I do feel like artists now, even though their lives are very different, there's a lot more noise in the market. You can have an opportunity to reach an audience. Even if it's a smaller audience, you can build a business around that or build a lifestyle around that in music in a way that was impossible 30 years ago. The other thing I would say in terms of internet in general, the fact that you've got so many artists that are performing live now and finding an audience, sometimes it's an old audience. That also would have been impossible 30 years ago, because it would have been very hard to aggregate people that, are distributed and a very targeted fan base, where now you can do that. And I think it's been great for artists. I mean, their careers are extended because of what the internet has brought to the music industry.
And so what way does that apply to the future of film and TV?
Well, I think it's a little bit different because you've got, several franchises that have these kind of, installed fan bases. But generally, television is a bit more ephemeral traditionally. And then, as we saw in the evolution of television, shows that would disappear got more life through syndication, which was a breakthrough model 50 years ago to start, redistributing and replaying these content. And what we're seeing now is it shows that, maybe even 50 years old are getting new life. So I think it's a similar model where the extension of and expansion of franchises is playing out, because now you've got so much access. And be curious to see if it is the same sort of model where some of these franchises can live on for many years beyond what would have been feasible prior to a streaming model. The thing that's an unknown is, how this plays out in such a noisy environment. As it is, as we all know, using streaming services is very hard to find the content you want to watch. And that, will get better. I do think that AI will play a role in making that easier, helping you navigate to something or talk your way to something that you want to watch. But I think it will also continue to add more and more value to the back catalog of companies like Paramount. And that's one reason that we're very actively making sure that our archives and our broader collection of assets are readily available to be licensed or distributed through streaming throughout the world.
So if you had to look back at it, what was your vision when driving Hearst's transition to a cloud-first environment? And how did it reshape the company's digital strategy?
Well, the push at Hearst was early in the cloud transition. That was about 2012, and there were scaled, moderately scaled, I would say, cloud providers, with Amazon being the leading provider. And the vision when I came into that company was really to give them a core shared technical capability. When I joined Hearst, they had no shared, common technical foundation at all. So moving to the cloud gave us a common architecture on which we could build. And when we had that common architecture, then we could build new opportunities in digital. So it really accelerated our digital ambitions and made them kind of more refreshed, if you will, relative to what came before that. Because when I joined the company, the digital model was to take a magazine, turn it into a very high quality PDF effectively, and put it on an iPad. So it was, sort of similar to the early movies being someone just putting a camera in front of a stage and recording a play. And moving to the cloud enabled us to innovate, generate a lot more content, make sure that it was something that, played well on the internet. And then when social became more and more of a platform, and in particular, I remember when Evan came in and talked about this new service called Snapchat, and we were able to really jump on that and build up, one of the better, branded experiences within the Snapchat environment when that got off the ground.
So in hindsight, what would you have done differently during this cloud migration process, and how do you bring that hindsight to Paramount now?
Well, I did learn from that. So when I joined Paramount, I took the learnings from the Hearst migration and applied that to how we approach things at Paramount. And if anything, it just gave me more confidence that this was the right direction to move. The thing that I learned and that we did put in place at Paramount was to make sure that we had a strong commitment from the cloud providers. So we did a very important strategic partnership with AWS, Amazon's Web Services division. And we got buy-in not only from our CEO at the time, Bob Backish, but Andy Jassy, who was the CEO of Amazon Web Services at that time. We got them to both commit to this transition because it is a big change. And we had to do a lot of work to not only educate, but also retool our technology teams to be cloud first. And that took commitment all the way to the top.
So how do you align all these technology initiatives with Paramount's broader business objectives to ensure long-term growth and innovation?
Well, the key thing that I bring to the role is an experience running all aspects of a media business, which I did in both of my startup businesses. Really, understanding what it means to produce content, to license it, and then also to sell it. And that sort of broad view informs everything that I do from a technology perspective. I think a key thing is just the guiding principle. Like, we as technologists are here to serve the content. It's not the other way around. So when people say, oh, we're going to be a technology and media company, what they're really saying is we want to make sure we can adapt to these new distribution models. But we have to keep in mind that we are a media company, we're a content company first. And bringing that kind of ethos to the role and then how our team operates, I think keeps us emotionally and then overall aligned with the business.
So do you think the future of media companies is also technology/media companies?
Look, I think that technology is increasingly important and a key driver for all companies. And when you look at any stats related to how much technology is taking the load of operating businesses, it just increases every year. And we should be thankful for that, because when we unfortunately went through a pandemic, the fact that we could all go home and work seamlessly was a result of depending on the technology to connect us, to drive our work on a daily basis. And that has stuck with us. So it's one thing that I have to battle because I'm inside of a company running a technology function. I have to battle the misunderstanding that technology costs tend to grow, but then you have to look at those technology costs growing in the context of how much of the business is running on them. And you look at it over time, it's a dramatically larger portion of the overall business is now running on, core, compute and networking technologies.
So speaking of the pandemic then, has Paramount seen a big difference in affinity towards OTT platforms as opposed to theater, movie-going, cinema?
Well, we're just living through the same transition everyone else is, where we see the streaming businesses growing rapidly, the traditional pay TV on a gradual decline. And we're hopeful that theatrical continues to rebound from the COVID era. And we're investing in that and putting out top-notch theatrical content to support it. But I don't think we're very different than other major media companies in terms of navigating a transition, which as I said, it's hard to predict how all of this is going to land in terms of that streaming distribution. I do expect it to be more nuanced than most people will write about, because it's really not binary in terms of how that distribution model is going to play out. And I just talked about that on a panel with the head of technology for Amazon Prime Video, where we recognize that in some cases, we're both going direct to consumers. In many cases, we're going to the consumer together. And I think we just have to accept that reality that it's going to be a bit more complicated.
So which avenue of media distribution will see the same future as the compact disc went through, if it's not theater then?
Well, the compact disc was unique in that an entire industry was relying on selling one specific product format, so it's very narrow. So I think clearly traditional pay TV is going to continue to decline. I think we've already seen certainly in the U.S. market, satellite television going down even faster, simply because the end user experience requires a type of equipment that's no longer necessary. So I do think traditional pay TV will continue to decline, but nothing in the TV ecosystem is going to fall off as rapidly as CDs did. I mean, those declines, when I joined Sony Music in 2021, the industry was shrinking on CD sales about 20 to 30% per year. So really radical shift. As I said, happened over a matter of 5 years. Television is going to be on a much slower shift.
Right. So the last question for you is of a personal kind. What would you be doing in your life if not this?
I'd be playing music every day. I am Phil Weiser, the Global Chief Technology Officer of Paramount. Catch me on the Technologist of the Month show